Hi, I'm Jacques Barrett, comedian, actress, and idiot. I have a podcast of my own. It's called Quite the Pickle. Each week, myself and fellow comedian Emma Zammit think up a heinous situation, and then we interview a professional who gives us tricks, tips, and pointers on how to survive the pickle. At the end of each episode, we perform stand-up that we've written about what we learnt in the interview. It's a lot of fun. That's Quite the Pickle, available on iTunes and Spotify.
We hope you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Hey, this episode of the Anti-Social Podcast is proudly brought to you by these legends over at Patreon. Thank you very much to Andrew from Perth, Mick G from Sydney, Ash from Deniliquin, Dan from Dapto, Rod from Rayleigh in North Carolina, Patrick from Canberra, Liam from Brisbane, Chris from Sydney, Brendo from Lytton, Tim from Canberra, James from Brisbane, Christian from Canberra, and Steve from the Gold Coast. These people are my top tier supporters over at Patreon, part of the larger community of awesome people who have been backing your mate Andy here in his little old podcast, the Anti-Social Podcast. Support starts from only $1 a month, dirt cheap. Set and forget, you won't even notice it. And there are additional tiers if you want access to exclusive things such as the weekly podcast that comes out every Tuesday morning, the Patreon podcast. You can get free t-shirts, USB pass with the first 100 episodes, and a whole bunch of other things that are included over at Patreon and will be added over the coming months as well. So get on over there to patreon.com/Andy Dowling and support your mate Andy. Hey, episode 270 of the Anti-Social Podcast is here, and joining me on the potty this episode is Neville Pierce. Neville is a podcaster like me. He has spent many, many years interviewing musicians, both local and international, small and big fame, just lots and lots of different people, and has an amazing repertoire of amazing conversations that he's had with people over the years online. Neville is part of Everblack Media, and his podcast is the Everblack Podcast. So I will have links in the show notes over at andysocial.net and andydowling.net. Definitely through your podcast player that you're listening to right now, you can pause this. I trust you. Pause it and search for Everblack Podcast in your podcast player, and then subscribe to that, and then go back and press play on this podcast and listen to this episode with Neville Pierce. Everything will be in the show notes, of course, over at andysocial.net and andydowling.net. So enough crapping on from me. Please enjoy this great chat with the man himself, Neville Pierce. I've been quite impressed with the amount of hustle that you've been doing over the past, I don't know, I mean, how long have you been doing well, obviously we'll get to the band stuff and all that a little bit later on, but I guess with the podcasting, how long have you been sort of immersed in this?
8 years this month,
man.
Actually.
Oh,
I know.
So good. Good.
Well, it was radio first.
Yep.
Like I started off doing this as a radio show on a Wednesday night, and then I just transitioned it over to podcast. I don't know. It 8 years is a long time. I don't even know where it's gone. But it's, it's like a lot of it's like you, man, like a lot of hours on the phone, and then you look back and you go, oh man, that's a lot of time.
That's a lot of talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did you, how did it work in the early days? Was it sort of on, what kind of radio were you doing? Was it sort of community-based, or was it a little bit more big time? What were you doing in the early stages?
It was community-based. It was Rabbit Radio on the Gold Coast here, and it was all online. So we just had an online server, and didn't always work, but we tried to make it work. It was like, it was community radio, but, I had the metal show on Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock, and I just go in there and grab a beer and do the thing.
And was that just a mate of a mate sort of just letting you know about it? Did you stumble into it, or was it something you were actually actively trying to find an opportunity to sort of get into this field?
I actually went down there and I said, look, I would really like to do a metal show. And they were pretty skeptical at first. They were like, metal show? But I talked them into it. And then I ended up just hanging around.
Not gonna leave.
I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, obviously I studied audio engineering and stuff like that, but then the radio side, I did it for something to do on the side from band things, and I ended up really liking it. So
was it I mean, did you have, obviously you had the sort of the engineering aspect behind it. So I guess you, from a tech point of view, had a little bit of an idea, but no doubt, I mean, I've never done radio before apart from sort of being on the other end of the mic and doing a couple of interviews here and there. But, podcasting's been sort of what I've been doing for the past several years. But radio seems to be a different league altogether, and I think there's some clear differences. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's just you being in the game for so long, but even as you're speaking, I hear, and maybe it's just because you've already given me the information, I've just linked it all together, but you've got a bit of a radio voice happening as well. Like you're very smooth, and it's just perfect for radio. So was there a little bit of a, I don't know, some skills that were built in the early days of sort of working on your craft, or was it a little bit of a natural sort of just fall into it and just keep going for longevity?
It's funny. I actually started off in a call center for like 4 years in like a terrible call center job that I hated, and I just talking on the phone every single day to people screaming at you, and I guess it just developed from there, which is a really weird place to, you know what I mean? And I'd have some people go, "Oh, you should do radio."
Yeah.
And I never really thought about it because, I don't know, I trip over my words a little bit. So it just ended up from there. I just went, you know what? I'm going to go do that. And I just did it.
Yeah, I don't
know how it worked.
It might be just, I don't know what actually makes, or what the characteristics are of what makes a great like radio voice, but I guess there's a little bit of bass to the voice, and some clarity there on pronunciation and things like that. Shit that I'm absolutely horrible at doing. So I'll never get a job in radio. That's why I've just thought, I'll do my own thing with podcasting. But getting into it and sort of starting, into community radio. Was it a case of sort of picking up some tips and tricks along the way from some of the other guys that were working at the station, or was just doing your own thing?
Pretty much just doing my own thing.
Yeah.
I'd go in there. There was one show, like a dance show, that was on before I was on, and I'd go in there, and then they'd say, "There's a button, there's that," and I'd just do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's weird. It's one of those things where I literally just stumbled in and just blindly went, I'll give it a go. See, but I find it funny because you've got a really good voice. You've got, with your podcasting and stuff. You say, but you sound like you've done radio before.
Oh,
you're a natural at this.
Oh,
stuff.
There you go. Oh, geez. Now we've hit the ground running with the compliments back and forth. So thanks, mate.
Come on, mate.
But it's interesting, isn't it? And I guess it's one of those things where when you hear your own voice, there's that weird. There's a term for it when you hear your own voice and you sort of cringe and you don't like the sound of it. But obviously, when you hear somebody else talk, there's you're hearing it from a different angle, and I guess it's not resonating in your own skull as well, so it's probably a different audio experience altogether. But it's just it's interesting just to listen to, because obviously you and you've been doing it for considerably longer than I have, but to speak to lots of different people from all over the world and different ages and demographics, backgrounds. You'll hear lots of different voices, and some people, as soon as they start talking, you think, oh man, this person shouldn't be doing interviews, or shouldn't be, or their voice is just not complementing an audio interview at all. I mean, I'm sure you've come across a bunch of those ones over the years.
Yeah, I have. There's, not going to lie, but you got to try and roll with it.
Yeah.
It's sometimes. You hear it on the radio, like mainstream sort of radio, and you hear some of the announcers, and it sounds like they're putting on a voice, if you know what I mean. It's weird. I can't listen to mainstream radio.
A bit of theatrics.
Yeah, and it's who talks like that?
Well, it'd be funny if you met up with them in real life and just like at a barbecue or something like that, and they just fell into it. It wasn't their natural voice, but they were just so used to doing it that they just, like, after a few drinks, just fall into it by accident without even knowing. Hey, welcome back.
How you going? I'm Husey.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's weird. It's a strange thing. I guess the weirdest one has been, for me, interviewing people.
Mm.
You hear people sing, and then you hear them talk and you go, man, you don't sound how you sing at all.
Is there anyone that comes to mind straight off the bat where their speaking voice versus their vocals, or their singing or whatever just does not match whatsoever?
Yeah, Grave Pleasures. We used to be a band called Beast Milk.
Right.
I think it's Matt. Yeah. You know, he's got this real deep sort of Nick Cavey sort of voice, and then you hear him singing, talking, and he's very, I don't know, very English. But man, yeah, I don't know. How about you? Have you ever had that happen?
Oh, I think I've certainly. I mean, it's one of those things, especially metal, because I mean, even speaking to you, I mean, I know you're in a band, and I've heard some of your music, and then I hear you talk, and I've watched some of the podcast stuff you've been doing online, and so even that, when you look at it, you go, well, it's not a clear match there. It's not exactly what I was expecting, and. I used to live up your way and used to go to a lot of metal gigs in Brisbane, and and I've told this quite a bit on the podcast, so people can give me a break. But I'd go and see a black metal band or a death metal band or something like that, and they're going pretty hard, during the songs and everything, and then in between the songs they're like, oh, cheers guys, cheers mate. And it's just like, oh man, the whole atmosphere has just been sucked out of the room with that voice. Oh, please keep the gravelly, Scandinavian accent in check, even between the songs, please. So some of that stuff it's quite interesting, because I think you've probably seen it quite a bit over the years, where, especially in sort of heavier music, where there's so much aggression, and the way that musicians and the music's portrayed in the public domain versus what people are actually like. And a lot of people in metal are absolute sweethearts. They're amazing people. They're really gentle and considerate and amazing people to talk to. But then, get them in front of a mic or on stage and they just become demons. They're beasts. And it's just such an amazing thing just to see these dramatic contrasts between the two.
It's a funny thing, that, isn't it? Like when you get up, because you get up there on stage and it feels like you're possessed by something, and then you get off stage and you're like, you feel $1 million, you feel awesome.
Yeah. It's a total ego rush being on stage. It's not even an ego thing, because you just, you lose the ego, if anything. It's you're just not yourself here. Sometimes if you're obviously wearing like an outfit and you got some paint on and you're dressing up as a character, then you can really lose yourself in a completely different identity. But even just, someone like myself, chuck a pair of jeans on and a t-shirt and jump up on stage and thrash about, you sort of just forget, oh, it's just me. Like, because as soon as I get off the stage, I go back to the old self-conscious Andy and sort of looking around going, oh, geez, don't want to make eye contact with anybody, or unless I've had like 20 beers under my belt or something like that, but on stage, it's just a completely different thing. It's like, oh, this is where I'm meant to be for the next however long. And there's no, you don't have time to think about, any of the normal social cues that we all go through on a day-to-day basis. So it's an interesting thing, and I haven't really thought about it too much until talking to musicians and doing the podcast stuff, and it's been a real eye-opener.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, totally. And everyone sort of seems to go through that same thing, but everyone's, metal dudes are sweethearts, and that's the thing that's pretty funny, because everyone thinks that metal dudes and metal girls are, absolute demons off. You know what I mean? But it's true. Nicest people in the world. Oh,
absolutely. I mean, there's always a few bad seeds in the bunch, but overall we're a good bunch. I think overall we're pretty good. With the podcasting, obviously that transition from community radio to doing your podcast, was it more or less the same show that you just decided to change the medium? So you were moving away from basically just moving from radio to podcasting, but keeping more or less the same sort of format? Or was it a case of getting to a point and sort of reinventing what you were doing or extending on an existing idea?
It was more so, it was getting harder to get down there, on a Wednesday night. I ended up having to pre-record the show and uploading it, and it just gradually got to the point where it was just getting quite difficult to do and upload. It was so I just went, look, I'm just going to focus on just uploading the interviews and keeping it simple, and I just ended up sticking with it. I don't know, I kind of do, I miss going down and having a few beers at the Marquetta and stuff like that, but yeah, it just ended up being such a massive task that I gradually probably over about a year, moved it over.
What was the reaction like being on community radio? Because obviously for yourself, no doubt you had an interest. There was a niche that you wanted to scratch by doing it and sort of getting in there and having a go. But I mean, I've certainly sort of I know a lot of friends that have done community radio over the years, and I've been on sort of, as I said before, sort of on the receiving end of going in and doing an interview, but never done it myself. What sort of reaction locally with the local scene, down the Gold Coast did you get over that sort of 12 months or so just doing it on community radio? Is it a really tough grind to sort of build that awareness, especially if it's a metal based program?
You know what? It was actually quite good. The reaction was pretty well received. I'd have bands hitting me up all the time. They'd come in and hang out, like they wanted to be part of it. And it seemed to, it was a really great experience. We did have some technical issues because it was like pretty low community, so it just didn't always work sometimes. But we did what we could, and the local community seemed to respond pretty well to it.
And so you're doing a lot of sort of in the studio interviews with the local bands and things like that, just to sort of prop them up.
Yeah. They'd come down and hang out, and we play tunes and take requests and get up to some no good, which was
certainly a good thing to be doing during the week. Most of us sort of just working a job and just sort of go home and sit in front of the couch and not do a great deal else. But to do something like that, especially if you got like-minded people dropping by and you're able to sort of play some good tunes and chill out, and it's sort of obviously it's not a job, but it's you're providing a service to people by getting on the airwaves and sharing some music. But I mean, it must be because you love it so much and it's you're passionate about heavy music. Then it just becomes like this really cool way to break up your week by something to look forward to, sort of on Hump Day.
Yeah, it was awesome. I used to go straight from work and I'd drive like 40 minutes to band rehearsal. And I'd do a couple of sets, and then I'd drive all about 40 minutes back and do the show. So it was like Wednesday nights were like all metal.
Wow.
And it was the best, man. I used to love it. Yeah. And because I had a bar there as well, you'd have a few beers and then, a few Burley Brewery big heads, and away we'd go. That wasn't a plug. I just liked them. So...
Oh man, that sounds dangerous. It sounds it's just like the perfect mix of good times. I'm sure your Thursday mornings were a bit rough around the edges.
Sometimes they were, but it got interesting because sometimes you'd have the bands that would be a bit nervous and they'd have a few beers to sort of prop up their courage, and they'd come in and they'd get a little bit too loose. And you'd have to be like, oh, I'm going to mute that, because you can't, obviously there's no delay. It was all live. So sometimes it got a little hairy. Had one band member, I won't mention who it was, farted in one of the microphones, and I just remembered not to use that microphone.
Oh.
There you go. Yeah. Live on air. Oh, and so that's, I don't know if anyone remembers that, but
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely.
That was interesting. I know. I was like, okay, well, that's number 2, and that's staying as number 2. Yeah.
Quick, think in the moment. Whatever you can do just to keep this thing moving. Let's move on. Yeah. I mean, you would have that even now with podcasting. Obviously, you've got a bit more control. It's not live. You can edit everything out later on. But I feel, at least, from me doing it over the years, where you really feel there's a sense of being in the moment and sort of wanting it to work as best as possible, not so much to reduce the amount of editing time, but you just want to have the best experience with that person having that conversation. And there are times that I've had over the years where somebody's just said something absolutely ridiculous, or, a question or something I've said's just fallen on deaf ears, or I've got a one-word response and then there's just crickets chirping in the background. And you just got to think really quickly to sort of keep things moving. Have you sort of, like, it might not be something you're conscious of, you might just be doing it naturally, but are there certain things that you think about when you do have those interviews and you're talking to somebody and straight off the bat you realize that this might be like getting blood out of a stone to get something good out of this conversation. Are there certain things that you think about at the beginning to sort of try and help it, mitigate the loss of having to turf a podcast episode?
I've had probably about 5, but it's not something I go in and think about so much. Like, I really try not to think about that I'm going to go in there and it's just going to be a train wreck. But I have had a couple, I won't mention, where I've had to like really edit them, like really piece them together, because the one-word answers, one in particular was so bad that it was like, you get 15, 20 minutes, and it literally ended up being like 5 minutes. It was the longest silences, and it was really awkward. Have you had ones like that?
Yeah.
I guess you have.
Yeah, and I've had a few. I'd probably be similar to you, probably 4 or 5 that have just never seen the light. Well, had never seen the light of day, just because there was just nothing salvageable whatsoever. Just absolute train wrecks, and a couple of them were partly my fault, where I was just ill prepared, thinking that I might be able to walk into this and sort of just go with the flow and sort of get a natural conversation going, but then realizing that other person doesn't want to have a natural conversation. And so that's when you need your prep. That's when you need your notes. That's when you need your questions to fall back on just to keep it moving. And there's a couple of times where I didn't do that. And it wasn't a case of once bitten, twice shy. It was twice bitten, well, hopefully third time shy now. So I'm a little bit more prepared with people just in case. But I've had other ones where, because with my podcasts, I'm a lot of it, and probably the majority have been musicians, but I talk to a lot of different people, a lot of random people from different backgrounds, people that interest me. And I've spoken to people that, might work in, say, emergency services or like a real job, professional. And they're interested, they want to have a chat. And so I'll go and do a podcast with them. And then I start asking them questions. And, I've had one particular person who just said, "Oh, well, I can't answer that." I'm like, "Oh, okay, no worries. That's cool. I'll move on to the next thing." And then that became the theme throughout the whole conversation. I just could not get anything out of it. Because of my protocol, I'm not allowed to share that information. I'm like, okay, so what can we talk about, really? Apart from really general, vague things that don't really go anywhere, I can't get anything here to work with. And so for that particular person, I had to sort of, after we stopped, that person was really, really nice, but I just said, "Look, don't know how much of that I can use, but if I do use it, I'll let you know." And it's tucked away in the archives.
So, but you've had some amazing guests, though, on your show. I mean, look, you had Stan Bush, man.
Yeah,
Like,
that was pretty
shit.
good. But I had to do a bit of editing with him as well, and this is nothing against Stan, but I think, and you might find this as well with some of your guests, where, these guys may do a lot of interviews, may not, but aren't terribly tech-minded, especially probably in the last 12 to 18 months, especially going into COVID, where a lot of people are relying on their own home technology, and a lot of these guys are just not as savvy as you would expect. And so with Stan, to begin with, we had to get him to download Skype. He'd never used Skype before, and I thought, that's okay. I said, we can use a whole bunch of different things. I gave him a bunch of different options. And he's like, no. And he's like, I'll download Skype. And he's like, okay, how's it work? And I'm like, okay. And so I gave him an online tutorial for him to read. And then he asked me a bunch of questions. So we got into that. And he was fine. And he was really cool. He's so polite and so nice with me, and just super nice guy. But I really had to walk him through to begin with to get him running. But then also, as we were talking, he had things going on in the background. He had his wife walking around the background. I think he had a kid, and then he was trying to shoo them away out of the shot. Even though we had our videos on, so we could see each other, but I didn't record the video. But he was just getting distracted by everybody around him. I'm like, "Come on, Stan. Come on, you know you're doing an interview. Lock the doors, keep them out. Come on, give me just a bit of your time." So but I mean, like, pinch yourself moment, because I mean, that's somebody who was a soundtrack to my childhood. So that was super cool.
Yeah, he's one I'd love to have on the show, because right behind you can't see it obviously because we're doing this all in audio format, but behind me I've got my big Transformers movie poster with all my Transformers figures. It it's all my childhood, man. So when I heard that, I was screaming like a 6-year-old. And I mean, was that one that you found that you were maybe a bit nervous about because you yourself, like, it was so significant?
A little bit. I think I mean, the good thing about him was that I knew enough where it was really easy for me to dump a bunch of questions and a bunch of different things and topics and things to talk about and things to link back in depending on which direction we went. So I felt pretty good, and he was really animated on email and messaging backwards and forwards and everything like that, and he seemed to be really excited to do it. So that kind of took a bit of pressure off me. I think when the nerves kicked in was a bit of the technical troubleshooting at the beginning, and I thought, oh God, okay, by the time we get past all of this, he might be too exhausted to even want to engage in an interview, and then I might be so paranoid that is this all working, that we might not get the best out of each other. But I was really happy with it. But some of the ones that you walk into, I mean, I mean, the nerves are high. It can be pretty full on. You have to keep sort of bringing yourself back to earth and going, okay, it's just a person, there might be someone you may have idolized at some point in time in your life, but they're just a person. Just remember that. And, they generally go pretty well. But I mean, for you, I mean, is there somebody that you've spoken to over the years where, not so much, two things. I mean, somebody who sort of, you had the nerves going into it, but somebody who was a total pinch yourself moment where you thought, oh my God, I can't believe I'm just speaking to this person.
I've had a few of them. I've been like really, really lucky, especially last year with COVID. It just seemed to really open the floodgates because, a lot of these dudes are just are sitting at home.
Yeah.
So they're like, yeah, I'll do some interviews. But I think the one that really got me was Odorous. Oh man, Dave Brocky is such one of my biggest heroes, and he was just everything that I'd hoped. Such a cool guy. But I had that moment where it's like, oh, I'm talking to Odorous, and I had to reel myself back in and also stop laughing because he was just hilarious. I actually had 2 edits of it. There was the one that I was airing on radio. And then there was the unedited version, which is not safe for work. But that one's probably my favorite, But I've had others, and it's just, you got to try and reel yourself back in. Hey, you've got to be like, they're just people and they're just doing their job. But yeah, I've had a couple of fanboy moments where I've lost complete track of what I was talking about, and have you? Which ones have you?
Yeah, I think. Geez, I'm just trying to think of people off the top of my head that I'm a big Aussie rock fan, and I got to go and hang out with Steve Balby from Noiseworks at a studio here in Sydney, and just from a sort of knowing somebody else, and sort of said, oh, is he keen? Here's his details, and so sitting there in the control room, and he's got all his guitars around him, and he's just been mixing something, and we're just talking about songwriting, and he's telling me about, how he wrote, some of the biggest Aussie rock songs of all time. And I'm just sitting there going, who the fuck am I? Like, what am I doing here? Like, what right do I have sitting here quizzing somebody about songwriting when this guy, has made some pretty good coin over the years and is a prolific writer? I mean, somebody like that. And, even last year I did one with Andrew Farris from InXS, and, that's global. What he's done for music, for rock music, is just incredible. And he's telling me these wild stories, and I'm just sitting there. And for some of the ones that I've been doing over the years, I'll go out to people. Like, COVID definitely kept me at home, but I try to get out and meet people where I can. And for that one, I met him at the, oh God, what was it? The Shangri-La Hotel in Sydney down at the Rocks. And so we had to try and find a quiet spot, which was whenever you go somewhere, that's the nightmare, because you've always got these extra hurdles you got to sort of manage. But we found this relatively quiet spot, and we're just sitting there on this couch, and we're just talking, and I'm just sitting there, and he's just telling me the story, and he's going off on a tangent, and I'm just letting him go. I'm like, you go, mate. You go for gold. Like you talk for as long as you want. I've got all day. I'm sure you don't, but I do. So I'm just going to lap up this moment and just try to not float off with the fairies and, and lose my train of thought. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely been some pretty cool ones like that. But I mean, for yourself, has it been the opposite end of the spectrum where you've spoken to somebody where you've maybe not idolized or really looked up to, but somebody you really admire, and what you've got versus what you expected was a very different thing? So it's almost like that old saying where it says, "I never met your heroes."
Yes.
And there could be that person that you end up going, "Oh man, that was actually really disappointing."
Yeah. I've probably only, probably 500 interviews or something. I looked back and did, and probably only about 5 or 6. There was one that I won't mention anyone's names, but there was one. I know I'm not going to give you any juice. No beans spilt tonight, my friend. There was one in particular, and I was shitting hard before this interview. And I got on the phone, and it was like they were at a party.
Yeah.
And I could hear people talking, and you could just tell that they just weren't present. They weren't talking. Like, I'd ask a question, and they'd turn around, they'd be talking to somebody else, and then they go back, and they're like, yeah, cool. And it just wasn't there, and it was so hard to edit and listen back to. Since then, I've spoken to that person and made amends with that. But it was at the time, I was so bummed out because it was someone that that I'd idolized with. But you have them. I mean, that people are people, I guess.
Well, that's a tough thing, isn't it? I mean, you, like all of us, we've got our good days and our bad days, and you're really at the mercy of what they ate that day, or whether they ate, and how much sleep they got the night before, and whether they've decided to partake in a few drinks beforehand. There's so many variables there that can turn it, into it can be a potentially amazing chat, or it could be an absolute train wreck, and you just really don't know until you connect and you start talking. You go, oh, okay, we're going in this direction. All right, let's see what we can do to try and save this one. Dear God.
Have you ever made someone mad?
No,
that's one.
I don't think so. But see, one thing that I want to work on, and I don't know whether I need to actually work on this or not, but sometimes I think I'm a little bit too agreeable. And sometimes, like, there's certainly been people over the years where they've said something that it's been a little bit ridiculous, not blasphemous or over the top or anything too crazy, but they've said something where I probably, my instincts should have been to correct them, or to say, actually, that's not right because blah, 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 blah. But I've been too scared to get someone off guard that I've gone, oh yeah, and then I've just moved on to the next thing and I've just let them sort of go. And for me, I've always, in the back of my head, I've got, I need to get better at that. Not so much to make it awkward or anything, but just, when there might be a little bit more truth to the story or something like that, and I can clarify, then just to challenge it a little bit in a polite way. So that's definitely something I've got to work on. But is there somebody that you've royally pissed off?
There was, one person. Won't mention any names, but I mentioned another bandmate member that they weren't too friendly with, and they got real mad at me.
Oh no!
But that's all right. I turned it around.
Yeah, you
turned it around, but they weren't real happy. Oh. It was one of those moments. Actually, the first interview I ever did, straight off the bat, I almost threw it all in before I even started.
Right.
Because I did my very first interview, and they were just not in a good mood. Straight off, just the horns. I got the full brunt of it, and I was like, oh, if this is what it's like, I don't know if I can do it. But then I got the second one, which was Trevor Sternard from Black Dahlia. Shout out to that dude.
Nice.
What a legend. He was the one that made me want to keep doing it, actually. He was the one that was like, I was like, oh, okay, well, people have good and bad days. So, yeah.
It's the hard thing. I mean, it definitely, I guess that can engulf you, from a nerves point of view. You get nervous every time you're sort of about about to connect with somebody and about to start talking, and you're thinking, oh my God, what am I about to walk into? Especially those ones where people are doing presses and they've potentially already done a stack of interviews talking about their latest release or whatever they're about to embark on. And you're just going, oh, I hope they're still fresh. I hope they're still feeling it. I hope they're still enthusiastic to talk about whatever the hell they're about to talk about, because I need something here. And I know I've had a few of them, and I think it just, in hindsight, it's been really good to experience those things, because I think you certainly learn a lot of little, not so much intentional tips and tricks, but I think you just instinctively start to be able to sort of be flexible in the conversation and in the moment, and sort of find ways to as you did before, like with that other one where you piss that person off, be able to dig deep and find a way out and get them back on track. And that's a really tough thing to do. I don't think it's a natural thing that many people are able to do.
No, but I mean, it's something that over the years that I've definitely struggled with. Sometimes there's no going back. Once it goes down that rabbit hole, you're like, how do I? So the album, I guess it's just it's hard to sort of swing back. Yeah, because but I don't know. Do you have rules? Do you have certain things? I don't know. Like I've got. I know it sounds silly, but I don't like bringing up reunions. You know what I mean? Like when those bands that have obviously broken up and they just get it every single interview is, when are you going to reunite this band? When are you going to reunite the band? When are you going to? It's like, man, it's done. Or they just, for a fact that they don't get along with ex-members. And you're like, why? They just dig it up for clicks. That's something that I guess my one thing. It's like I don't go down that road. So
yeah, that's a tough one, and I think also it's a question that potentially a lot of other people are going to ask as well. And I think that's something that I've always been really paranoid about doing, especially music interviews, where I'm talking to musicians and people that I probably don't have a lot of prior connection with, because I'm so paranoid about asking a question that has been asked many, many times in the past. And I don't want to fall into that trap and then them glaze over and go, oh, this is one of those interviews. Okay, I'm going to go into autopilot and just give you what you need, and we'll just do bare minimum and tick the box and off we go. And sometimes that's created a bit of paranoia for myself because I've overthought it. But I can certainly appreciate that that would be a particular topic where you just go, it's more than likely just not going to give you anything of value whatsoever. It's not going to be, there's nothing positive that's going to come out of a response to a question like that.
That's it. You just make them mad. But hey, but then how would it be being that one person that turned around and asked that question and they're like, well, in fact, Guns N' Roses are getting back together with,
Yeah, that's it. You just cross your fingers hoping that, or even the one where he says, you know what? Now that you mention it, fuck it, I'm going to go pick up the phone. I'm going to give him a call after this. Let's see if we can do it. I'm like, oh my God, I started it.
You know what? I had one of those. Was it the year before last when Devin Townsend I interviewed Devin.
Yeah,
and I'm such a massive Strapping Young Lad fan, and he dropped that he was going to be playing strapping stuff again, and I'd never in a million years, but I wish I'd probed a little bit more about it. But man, I just remember that moment and just
so please tell me hard. More. Tell me more. I need to know the details.
It was the best thing in the world, and hearing him, we're gonna, play some strapping shit, and I was like, oh, dude, best thing in the world, I guess after so many years of him going nup,
and then here it is, ready to go, ready to get back into it. Do you have other rules that you sort of think about? It might not be sort of black and white rules that you're sort of strict on, but are there certain things that for yourself, just to keep yourself in check, little do's and don'ts?
That's a good question. Because I don't know. When it comes up to it, I usually say I try and stop myself. But that's one rule. That's, I guess that's my one big rule is try not to get too clickbaity. I guess that's what I don't know. I don't know why I even thought of that. Where am I going? All right, Cool. Reel me back in. I'm not used to being on the other end. I'm not used to being on the other end of this thing. So.
Oh, I like it. I like it, actually. And it was interesting. It's interesting talking to you as well, because you were throwing it back on me, going and asking me questions. I'm like, oh, you're going into interview mode, mad. Okay, and I'm thinking, okay, hang on, I've got to ask you questions as well. So we'll divide it down the middle, and we'll both make each other comfortable, and we'll just ask each other questions, and we'll be fine. But
it's weird though, right? I don't know. I guess you've been interviewed, for Lord over the years as well. So you've been, but me, I guess I've only done a couple, and I'm usually the one putting people in the hot seat. So this is a weird kind of situation for me. So I hope you're getting some good material.
Oh, yeah.
I hope it's not right off.
Oh, no. No way. No. I love it. I love it. But, I mean, it's good because I think the whole point to, especially, I mean, the way that I do it, and it might be a little bit different to you, is for me, like a large chunk of the podcast over the years was about connecting with people. So people that I knew and had bumped into over the years, and it was sort of just to get better at conversation. Because, for me, like, the extent of a conversation will be at a venue with bands playing in the background. Everyone's spitting into each other's face because you're trying to talk, right up to their ear. You're 5 or 6 beers in. It's all blurry. It's all, dribbly mess. It's just nothing great's happening. And so that was the extent of a lot of my conversations with people. And I thought this whole podcasting would be a good opportunity to reconnect with a lot of people that I've met over the years and actually have a really good conversation, but also to try at times, not all the time, because sometimes you really do need a bit of a question and answer format, but to just let it hang out and just have a conversation, just see where it goes. And I've had some really fun ones, and I'll clean them up every once in a while. If sometimes they might get a little bit long in the tooth, or there'll be a few stumbles, or people sometimes say things that they shouldn't say, or they regret it and they quickly tell me straight after. But I love it. I love the candidness of it. I love just the back and forth and just having a conversation. And I reckon it's great. And so for me to have a chat to you, it's interesting because I only know you in a very limited way from what you put out online with your podcast, and also just little glimpses of your band as well, and sort of from a music point of view. So I was actually quite excited to give you a call and have a chat because there's no doubt a whole lot of things that I've got no idea about you. So it's just my way of being a nosy Andy.
I appreciate it though. Like as I've said, I'm a fan of your work and your podcast. So when you asked me to come on, I was actually pretty chuffed. So thank you. Cool. Thanks for asking the questions and trying to get behind the scenes, look at my weird life.
Yeah, man. And it's exciting. I think for a lot of people, it's such a nerve-wracking thing to have conversations with people in general. I think most of us are more socially awkward than we like to think. But then also to have the additional layer of pressure of recording the conversation. So that's sort of in the back of your mind. But then also the second thing is that usually for what you do and what I've done at times as well is have these conversations with people that are well known. They've got a public image. A lot of people know who they are. You could almost use the word famous at times. And that can be quite nerve-wracking for a lot of people. So I think even for me, like I find it fascinating to hear how other people approach it and their own sort of thoughts and the way that they manage it or overcome certain tics and nervousness and shortcomings that they think they have, just to be able to do something that a lot of people would probably struggle to do.
Well, that's why I kind of wanted to do it in the first place. It is more so I get a little nervous with social anxiety. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
Out, when I'm out and about with people. Especially when I'm playing a show or something like that. I'm a person that can seem like I'm very outgoing, but I'm quite reserved in a lot of ways. But this is my kind of way of, I'm in a bit of a safe space, if you know what I mean. Do you get that as well? You can talk to people, but a lot of people can't do this. They can talk to people face to face, but they can't get behind the microphone or get on the phone. People are terrified of the phone, and I guess I take that for granted.
Oh, me too. I mean, mind you, like they're all little psychological hurdles that you create for yourself. Because for me, like I've got no problem making a phone call for the purpose of a podcast. Now I've trained myself that there's a method to the madness. But if my phone rings and it's a mate and it's caught me off guard, I'm reluctant to answer. Like I hesitate to answer the phone because I'm thinking, oh God, I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't know what they're going to ask me. I don't know why they're calling me. You know, am I going to be put on the spot and commit to something I don't want to do? And so sometimes I don't even answer the phone, which is so ridiculous because years ago, prior to, I guess, all of us being stuck in our phones, we're used to answering the phone and used to just talking on the phone and teeing things up and doing all that stuff. So it's a weird situation, and I think a lot of people are socially awkward now as a result of just the way that we've gone in that sort of towards that digital world that most of us live in now. So it's a weird thing. It's a really unusual thing, especially I'm very similar to just the way that you described it. And for me to sort of still be doing podcasting where I'm talking to people, it's I never thought I'd be able to do it.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? it's such a weird thing to comprehend. I'm exactly the same. And going back to what you were saying before about hearing your own voice. When you were a kid and you'd play radio with like a tape recorder, did you ever do that?
Yeah,
I did.
I did.
And you'd tee up the songs and you'd record it off, the TV or whatever, and then you'd talk in between. I don't know how many people out there actually did that, but hey, and then you hear it back, you go, that's a bit rough, and then you end up doing it later down the track, and you just get used to hearing your own voice. But people find it terrifying. And I totally understand why.
It's kind of like it's another version of public speaking, probably not as daunting or as scary as getting up in front of people publicly, but I think it's an element of that, and I think the nerves come from a similar place where it's a little bit vulnerable, and it's a silly thing because really you're just talking, it's just noise coming out of your mouth, and that's all it is. But it is quite it can be quite overwhelming at times. I mean, just even myself, on a day-to-day basis, let alone sort of doing a podcast or other people out there. But for yourself, I mean, this is an interesting question because for me, with the podcast, I've been doing it for 5.5 years, and I enjoy it. But like anything, you have your ups and downs, and at times you think, oh God, should I throw the towel in? Should I give this up? Then you find a little bit of a spark and you keep going. But for you, I mean, you've been doing it a bit longer than I have, and it sounds like you've racked up a hell of a lot more interviews. You've racked up way more than me. What keeps you going? Like, what's the motivation? What sort of gets you fired up to continue to want to do this each and every time?
That's a question I've been asking myself a lot lately, because I go through that. I'll get to a point where I'll just do a whole bunch and I'll burn myself out, and I'll be like, oh, okay, I need to take a bit of a break, and then something will come through in the email and I'll get excited because it'll be something that I love, and then I'm just back into it, back into the swing of it. I've had a couple of moments throughout the time where I've just gone, it becomes a bit obsessive in a way where I've spent way too much time thinking about it and just, my head in my phone trying to research stuff, and then, I've got to, be a dad and husband and a whole bunch of other things as well. You know what I mean? The big wide world work. But it's times like that. So it's just finding the balance, I guess. Do you find that can be a bit of a struggle sometimes as well? It's like you need to separate, that creative side and, real life Andy?
Yeah, all the time. It's a tough thing to sort of keep everything moving, and I find just your own inner momentum, can really sort of disappear or fizzle out really quickly if you're not continuously trying to just stimulate it, whatever you're doing. And so I'm constantly challenging myself just to ensure that I don't not so much slow down, because I certainly have breaks, and I might bulk record a bunch of stuff, and that gives me some nice buffer, and I can chill out a bit. But I'm always working on something to do with it in the background, just to keep my mind sort of in it. And it's difficult, and a good thing about it, and the thing that keeps me going, is that there's an underlying element of real excitement about it, where I enjoy the conversations. I especially enjoy the end of a conversation where it goes really well, because you sort of come off this adrenaline rush and you've got that high, and you've just connected with somebody, and you've had a great chat, and it appears that the other person has enjoyed it as well, which makes it even better. And I have those reminders all the time, and that sort of keeps the spark sort of there to keep me going. So yeah, it's all head games, everything. I mean, anything that you form a discipline to, and you want to commit to, a passion project or a job or anything that you're involved with, it's the discipline aspect is so key, and you can't be firing on all cylinders 100% of the time. It's just impossible. So you're always going to have those challenging moments. But is it similar for you? Like as far as so some of those underlying drives to continue to want to do it? Is it the excitement of who's going to come next? Are there people on your bucket list that you're still trying to tick off to eventually have a conversation with?
100%. Some people collect Pokemon cards. I collect. I don't know. You seem like you're kind of similar. You collect people.
Yeah.
That kind of sounds weird and kind of serial killer-ish, but it's totally not. But I don't keep people.
I collect people.
Yeah, you do. But I collect people. No, but you know what I mean. It's sort of like that. It became a bit of a game, to me, in a way, where it was sort of like, oh man, I've spoken to this person, and there's a bit of pride in that. You know what I mean? You've those challenges, I guess. But I do have, I think, about 5 on my bucket list that I've just, hopefully one day, I guess that keeps me going. I don't know what I'd do when I hit that. I'd probably still keep going, but, there's like Rob Halford is my number one.
Wow. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Man, Halford, there's Wes Borland, who, everyone talks about Limp Bizkit, but his solo stuff is so much more interesting, like Black Like Burns.
Fascinating guy.
Big Dumb Face. And then there's like Jack Black and Dave Grohl and a few others. Peter Cullen is probably really up there. Mate, he made me cry. That's another story. When I met him, and Bruce Campbell. I guess they're the ones that I'd love to talk to. Do you have a bucket list? Do you have ones that you just put it out there, who you'd love to have on your show?
Oh, I think
who's your
my Moby Dick, my main guy, and I think the likelihood of me getting this guy is very, very slim, because he just virtually never does interviews whatsoever. Is old boy Johnny Farnham. He's my guy since day dot of starting this podcast. I was going to get him on, and I've had it's been a while actually, but every few months I would reach out to Glenn Wheatley, and I say, Glenn, see John's going to do a tour soon. He's going to be coming nearby. Any chance I can grab him to do a podcast? And he was always humouring me and sort of being somewhat pleasant. And so you go, we'll work it out closer to. He doesn't normally do interviews, but we'll see. And I'm like, oh, glimmer of hope. Then I'll follow up again. He's like, no, he's not doing any interviews. So I'm like, oh, damn it. And that was just a repetitive thing that just kept happening. But over the years, I've realised just how few and far between he does that kind of stuff. And the only time he ever does anything sort of press-wise is him going on something on mainstream TV. It's something big time. But for me, like, that would be like to be able to sort of have a candid one-on-one conversation with him and just shoot the shit, because he's such a larrikin and he's such a personality, and just comes across as such a likable person. just I fantasize about what that would be like. I think that'd be super cool. So he's like the main person, like, and then after that, the list just sort of just drops down dramatically after that. I mean, there's heaps of great people, there's lots of interesting people around the world, but I always circle back to old Fansy.
I reckon you would absolutely nail that because you're so personable. That I don't think it'd be like an interview. It'd just be like a chat.
Well, that's what I fantasize about. I think that'd be so much fun. So much fun.
So just put it out there now. I'm like, listen, Fansy, if you're listening to this, you jump on that podcast because you know it's going to be a good time. What you got to bribe him? Maybe the kind of thing where I think it was Axl Rose had bribed was it Buckethead with like a Leatherface figure. Maybe you got to find something that is really rare for him. Something he really wants. Stand out in front of his house, tie it to some fishing line, throw it through his window, and then lure him out that way. And then just I don't know. That's going back to the thing about collecting people. Don't do that.
Sounds like you've got some experience there.
You shut up. It's getting late, mate. I'm getting crazy. Yeah. No, but I don't know.
I think you could be onto something though, where I think it will take some sort of creative angle. It can't just be so. The way that I was doing it to date was when I'd hit sort of a milestone or something like that, I'd try and tie it in with that to say, hey, like I'm going to try and make something of it. It's not just an episode in the mix of everything else. I'll try and, sort of make a big thing out of it. But, at the same time, I understand sort of compared to what he's done over the years and his stature, I'm, my podcast, little old podcast, me with my little radio station here. But I think maybe there's an angle where you could get quite creative, where you could find something that appeals to him. Maybe there's a way that I could get to a little bit of, I don't know, maybe a bit of crowd support, maybe a bit of crowdfunding. Maybe we could raise some money that can go to something that he gives a shit about. So not so much going to his pocket, but maybe he might want to get behind something that goes to a charity of his choice. I don't know.
There you go.
So
hey,
you
just nailed it.
There you go. So I might have to go to work and I've committed myself now. I'm not editing that out either.
Do not edit it. No. Here you go. Here's your goal. 2021. Is that the year? I don't even know. It's February. I just figured that out today.
It is.
Fansy on the Antisocial podcast. It's gonna happen, man.
All right.
Put it. Oh, mate. It sounds. You're determined. I mean, it doesn't, you don't have to throw a brick through his window. You've nailed it. Don't do that. What's wrong with me tonight?
I'll put a picture of Fansy on it. Oh, actually, I don't have one, but I need to get a vision board, and I'll put him up there. And it won't look too creepy. It won't be like a shrine. It'll just be a vision board, and just remind me. Just go, okay, Fansy, 2021. This is the year. We've got to make it happen. So I'll have to. I
think you're onto something.
Yeah, it has to be something like that.
You know what? There is something to that, though. There is something to that. I know it gets a little, about manifesting those thoughts and things like that. I dabbled in that, and you know what? I find that something happens, man. Just do it. Take a picture out. What's your favorite Banzi era? Fansy era, I should say, not Banzi.
Well, I love Banzi as well, but. Fansy, yeah, but see, you got me on the spot now. Look, I think sort of around Age of Reason, I think was absolutely fantastic. I think he was just at the top of his game there. But for me, sort of like the era that was really close to my heart was when he was still trying to find himself, in between sort of Little River Band and all that sort of stuff. And he was doing a lot of 80s soundtracks. And he was trying to like dig into the US market, and he sang these songs like Break the Ice and Thunder in Your Heart and on the Rad soundtrack, and these weird sort of obscure songs that he did was like this AOR Gold, this amazing stuff where he was trying to become a bit of a pop icon in the States and in Europe. So that's like, I love that stuff. It's super cool. And for us as a band, like we're all massive Fansy fans, like ridiculous Fansy fans. I mean, fuck, we in 2015 we had a tour called the Road to Fansy tour where we released an EP and it had a Playing to Win, the Little River Band track on there. We did a cover of that, and we saw that Fansy was playing down in Werribee, down in Victoria, and we all wanted to go, and we thought, well, we're all too cheap to go and pay for the tickets and go down there and see it, and why would we all go together? That's just so lame. So why don't we make a tour, do a full tour around the country, and use all that money to eventually pay for the tickets down at Werribee to go and see Fansy play. And that ended up happening. It was about 10 dates around the country, all the capital cities, and then we ended up, last date was in Melbourne, and then the next day we went to Werribee Park and got to see Fansy play. And that was the whole tour. And so for us, like, there's a bunch of different angles for us. Like, we've covered a handful of Fansy songs and so there's lots of there'll be lots of things to talk about, but I definitely have to find something that's going to spark his interest and make it a little bit unique. And anyway, I wasn't expecting to pitch or sort of verbalize a Fansy pitch for the podcast, but there you go.
Mate, putting it out there, you never know. You might be listening. You go, you know what? I'm going to go on that show, and hey. Just keep doing it. And I think if you get creative like that as well, you'll reel him in. For sure. You'd have to.
I'm just going to break him. I'll just have to break him. Not physically, but I just have to break just have to break him down. Just have to break him down, Just
That's it.
Eventually get to a point where it's like, come on, let's just do it. Let's just do it. All right, okay, no worries.
Fine.
Yeah.
I'll give you 50 minutes, and then end up 2 hours just shooting shit.
Oh, yeah.
Hey.
Well, I hope so.
I put it out there, man. Put it out, and I'll be listening. That's for sure.
All right, perfect.
Because see, that's the thing I also like about your show is it's quite broad. You've got so many different, and I like how on your YouTube channel you've got it all broken up in your different kind of like genres. You got your NBA,
different playlists.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad someone noticed that. Jeez, that was something that I thought I'm just doing it for my own little OCD tendencies there, but I'm glad that somebody else noticed. Thanks, mate. It's good.
No, I think it works, though. No, I totally think it works because, you get the people that not necessarily into metal, but they're like, they like the sport or they like the, the real life stuff and they can go down that rabbit hole. Where mine's just all just metal and nerdy shit.
It's cool.
Just thrown into one pot. I just go, well, that's who I'm talking to.
But obviously doing that over the years, you'll have people that have been listening for the majority of the time and enjoy listening to these chats because not so much, obviously an element of it is the guest. That's the highlight, but I think the consistent approach is you and your style and the uniqueness that you bring to it that people would really enjoy. So no doubt there'd be people that are always listening over the years and enjoying the way that you frame it and the way that you approach those conversations with these people.
It's terrifying. Thinking that people will actually listen.
That's it. I'm just recording. I forget I'm recording them. It's just like I'm having a chat and it's done.
Yeah, that's it. I like that. I also like that. I like the ones where you just start chatting and then you look at it and you go, oh man, it was like recently I had MC Bat Commander from Aquabats.
Yeah.
And man, like my kids are nuts for it. We listen to that in the car. I don't care. I love it. And and it was only meant to be a short one. And I look around and I go, oh man, I've had him for ages. And we were just talking about everything from cane toads to all kinds of weird stuff. And it was really fun. I like those ones. I guess you get that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I try. That's always the aim. I try to get to that point, and it doesn't always work. It depends. Once again, like what we were saying earlier, it's like all those variables that you just don't have control over. It's the person and how they're coming into that conversation, how they perceive what they're about to do, and whether they see any value in it. And sometimes it can take a while. I think that's always the hard thing when you do shorter conversations with people is that you've got to build rapport really quickly. You got to get people on side, and that can be a really tough thing. Whereas some of the longer form podcasts can be quite good because you can go through a little bit of small talk to begin with. You can sort of dance around, then after a while it's like, okay, now we've locked in. Now we're going. Let's go. Let's get into it. And so that's a lot of fun. But do you find that sometimes with some of the people who are doing press, like some of these musos who are doing, album runs for, doing their promo, and you've got to try and click and connect with them really quickly?
Yeah, and then when you get them warmed up, and then it's time to go.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, man, I should have asked him that. But they're the hard ones, hey. That's what, I mean, I've been lucky that sometimes they've straight off the bat, they just want to chat, and, then you can go into weird, wonderful places. But I don't know. It tends to be quite structured, I guess, because the focus on what I do is always, the promotion of what the band has got coming up or something like that. And then I'll try my best to sort of throw in some weird zingers that throw the conversation off, I love it.
Keep them on their toes.
Yeah, sometimes. Or, I love talking to people who are also nerdy as well, like the most brutal people in the world that are like Corpse Grinder.
Oh, no, he's hilarious.
See, but I'm not a World of Warcraft dude, but I know there's that common ground. It's that common ground.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like we both love the heavy shit, but we can talk about the nerdiest stuff that's gonna, make everyone think that you're not that dude that's gonna stab people in shadows.
And that's what people love. I mean, that's the element that people are hungry for. Like, I enjoy listening to interviews. I read a lot of online ones just for, when bands are doing press and things like that. And you learn a little bit about the album and some of the stories around it. But, when you really get a bit of their personality and stuff that's not related to music or their band, I mean, that's the stuff that is just absolute gold. I mean, that's the way you connect with people and you go, oh, now I really, not only do I like you as the guy in that band because I love the band so much, I actually really like you now, and now become so much more of a fan of you as a person in addition to, the music as well. And that can be a really tough thing to sort of squeeze out of people, but when you do, oh man, it's so good.
Who have you had that has done that? That you've just you've hit it off and you've either become friends with them, or you've just ended up being a huger fan afterwards?
I'm just trying to think of some off the top of my head. Not music wise, but Rusty Young, he's an author, and he wrote a book called Marching Powder, and it was all about him living in a Bolivian jail for a period of time, and then he's lived in South America for quite a few years, and he ended up living in Colombia, and he worked with the vigilante group to fight guerrilla armies and child soldiers and rescue kids and all this stuff. It's just crazy. Like, this guy's lived this amazing life. And I went to his, it must have been his girlfriend's place somewhere in North Sydney, and sat down and had a chat with him. And he was just the loveliest guy. He's all about hugs and, and just, we just had this really great chat. And then afterwards, like, he, every once in a while, he flicked me a message on like Instagram or whatever, or he'd give me a call, and he's like, hey, can you tell me how this like Instagram stuff works? I'm trying to work out this stuff and I don't understand, like, there's this thing about the algorithm, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like driving along, and I'm talking to this like, this incredible author, like this famous author, and just going, oh, like, is this happening? Like, this is so weird. But just getting like that humility aspect to him, and even over New Year's, I flicked him. I think he responded to a message on Instagram, and I just flicked him a quick message back and said Happy New Year, and just went back and forth about just life, and just for a little bit, and nothing to do. Like, I'd never talked to him about his writing apart from the podcast itself. So there's examples like that over the years where I've kept in contact with a few people, and just random messages, just saying hello, just checking in, and you learn a lot more about them, more so than their public fronts. So yeah, it's definitely a nice little bonus that comes out of talking to so many incredible people.
Have you ever had one that you've done in person, or even say when Lord supported a band and you've had that sort of Wayne and Garth moment where you're like, have the out of body experience? You know what I mean? Where you realise, it goes back to what you were saying before, but has there been one in particular, one big one that you've, you know, maybe supported or something like that and you've had that out of body experience?
Yeah, I think the first one, which has always been sort of the big one for us collectively, is Megadeth. When just prior to me joining the band, and the band used to be called Dungeon, and so we did a tour in Europe for a couple of weeks, and that was great. And I went over just to, you know, carry some gear and be a bit of a beer roadie, and I did the lights for the guys and everything like that. And it was just an absolute surreal experience. And this was a time where Dave wasn't drinking, and so we were a little bit paranoid, thinking, you know, well, we've got to be really careful and be on our best behaviour, etc. And you know, the first night of the tour, we're in Amsterdam, we're in the dressing room, and he comes in, and we hadn't, like, we'd sort of bumped into him in Australia because Dungeon played with Megadeth in Australia, but we hadn't seen him, and I hadn't actually met him in person. And so he comes in, and I'm just like, oh, who the fuck's opened this door? And so I look around the corner of the door, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, this is happening. And so he's like, you know, typical like Dave with his little snarl and his smirk and everything like that. And he's just talking, and it's just small talk, really nice. And then as he's, you know, leaving, he gives like everyone a hug and just says, you know, I'm so happy that you guys are on the tour, blah blah blah. Enjoy. You know, if you need anything, talk to this person, blah blah blah, and we'll take care of you. And it was amazing. And we bumped into him, you know, over the coming shows, and he was so nice to us. And even the last show of the tour, as he's, you know, we're saying our goodbyes, he's about to leave our dressing room, and he just punches me in the chest, like this playful punch. But this is a guy who fucking black belt karate or whatever, you know, he knows his stuff, and he just whacks me, and I'm just like, I think he winded me. And then he goes, and he says, see you later, you know, and I'm like, oh, see you, Dave, take care of yourself, you know. And like, just the most surreal thing where you're just standing there just going, this is happening. And it was surreal because you're in another part of the world as well, and there was just so many other things happening. But that will always stick out. But there's been lots of bands. I think a lot of the bands that I've idolized as a kid growing up, I've been lucky to play with. You know, Saxon and Queensryche and Halloween, and even Iced Earth, even though Iced Earth is a little bit controversial now. Certainly, but certainly enjoyed my time playing with them, and you know, despite what's happened in recent times, John was an amazing person to hang out with, a very, very generous and nice guy. But yeah, so I've had a bunch of those real pinch yourself moments going, oh wow, like this is where I've managed to get myself to in life. Like, I've found myself in this situation. How the hell did this happen? So it's been good. And I hope that, I mean, it's weird now. I mean, I'm sure, you know, you sort of playing in bands as well, where it's sort of, you know, the last 12 months or so has been a real shock to the system for musicians, and I'm sure you've heard it from other bands as well, where it's like, you're just a little bit lost at the moment. And for me, it sort of feels like we don't play that much anymore anyway, as it is. And so now, having this long period of time, I'm sort of thinking, am I going to get these moments again? Like, am I going to have these pinch myself moments where I get to go off and do a great tour and play with these amazing bands? And deep down, I hope that happens. But part of me is like, oh God, yeah, I don't know. It's just a different world now.
It is, and it happens so fast.
You
know, it was so quick that you know, it was like this time last year. It was like, I don't know, and now it's just a thing that we just live with now. But I hope you know, the vaccines and stuff like that come in, and then we can all go back to doing full shows. Because it's funny, in Brisbane, up here on the Gold Coast in Brisbane, we actually played more shows than what we'd played in a long time.
How good's that? Huh.
It was so cool. Weird. The weirdest thing in the world, because I mean, they were smaller attendances, but we were like, well, what else are we going to do? we're just going to sit around. But, obviously it was all COVID safe, of course, but it was so bizarre. But people were just so hungry to see live music, even if it was only a small room. People just, I guess they missed it. I don't know how it is where you are down there, man, but sometimes people take the local stuff for granted.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? They just, it's a different time. Like I was only talking about a mate with 20 years ago. You'd go to your local and there'd be heaps of people because we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have Netflix and chill. We just had beers and metal, And I think people sort of went, "Oh, I don't have that now. I want it. I want to go see some music." So I think when it all calms down, hopefully that especially with yourself going out there with the Lord Boys, that you're gonna experience so much more because people are just gonna be like, "Fucking need it now."
Okay, a call to action, folks. I mentioned it in the intro. I'm going to mention it in the outro as well. Go and use your little search function in your podcast player. Go and search for the Everblack podcast. Go and subscribe to it or follow it or whatever you need to do to keep it in your feed, and rate it and review it once you've listened to a few episodes, and support Neville and what he has been involved with for the past 8+ years. Amazing stuff. Definitely go and dig into the Everblack world by going to everblack.com.au. A great webzine, whole bunch of different things in there, so go and check all that stuff out there. Massive thank you to Neville for being a part of the podcast, and I hope you guys enjoyed the chat. It was cool for me to chat to somebody like Neville, who's got a few years on top of me doing band interviews and podcasts, and it was just a really, really fun chat. And I think we both went into interview mode. We were both trying to interview each other through that, which was kind of cool. It was very different. And I think I may have committed to something in there. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Now, before we wrap it up, of course, Patreon. Patreon is the best way to support this podcast, and supports us from only $1 a month. Honestly, the more people that I can get to sign up to Patreon for that $1 tier has a massive, significant impact on this podcast. Not only is it $1 a month, and when you get a lot of people, that adds up, but also just to have the numbers, the support of the people backing me, backing your mate Andy and the podcast is just huge. It's a massive motivator for me. And of course, financially, what the Patreon community have done to date has been absolutely amazing to support this podcast and keep it chugging along with all the expenses that come into running a podcast each and every week. So go and check it out, patreon.com/Andy Dowling. There's a few new things that are happening over there. Depending on the tiers that you sign up to, you get access to the exclusive weekly Patreon podcast episode that comes out every Tuesday mornings. And there's also tiers that get you access to the USB pass that gives that, well, if I can fucking talk English here. It has the first 100 episodes on the USB pass sent out to you for free. And there's also a top tier that gives you access to 4 free t-shirts, including free postage worldwide every year. So $1 a quarter, you'll get a brand new t-shirt design. Think Team Chronoplan. That's the t-shirt that came out late last year. Currently, we've got the Beluga Boy t-shirt that just got unleashed. An amazing t-shirt there for all my big four-headed mates out there. It's a bit of a tribute to you guys and a ridiculously dumb-looking plane. But nonetheless, it is on a t-shirt now. It looks amazing. And thank you so much to Tristan Tait, who's going to continue to design the t-shirts moving forward for the Antisocial podcast and also for Lord as well. He's been doing a lot of stuff for us. So stay tuned for the Lord space as well. There's some new things coming very soon. So go and check it all out over at patreon.com/Andy Dowling. It's an amazing way to support this podcast. And thank you very much. Before we wrap it up, of course, more podcasts coming next week. So in the meantime, please go and share the episodes. If you haven't caught up with all the previous episodes, dig into the back catalogue. Go and check it all out. And actually, while I'm speaking here, sorry, my phone just lit up. Massive thank you to Christopher Bass from the US, who has just pledged $1 for Patreon. Thank you very much, folks. So in the meantime, before the next week's episodes, I'm getting distracted here. Please share the podcast around. Go back and listen to the back catalogue. If you know anybody who's into podcasting and might listen to similar podcasts, please give them a link to Andy Social and recommend a couple of episodes for them to listen to. rating, reviewing, subscribing on all the podcast platforms is huge. Sharing them around, a bit of social media love, all that sort of stuff is huge. And I can't stop saying the word huge and awesome and awesome and great and thank you very much and blah, blah, blah. So enough crapping up from me for another episode. Another episode coming next week. I don't even know what I'm saying now. Take care and ta-ta.